Welcome to the Talking Free podcast. As the girl who has always been told she talks too much, can speak with a mouthful of marbles underwater, and can sell ice to Eskimos, I have found the perfect platform to have my say, freely. I am here to share with real people, having raw conversations about authentic stories. It is a place where you can feel safe discussing anything and everything. These stories will make you laugh, cry, debate, wonder, intrigue, and get curious about life as you talk free with Trudy Marie. Please note that the following podcast may contain discussions or topics that could be triggering or distressing for some listeners. I aim to provide informative and supportive content, but understand that certain themes may evoke strong emotions or memories. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or in need of support while listening, I encourage you to pause the podcast and take a break. Remember that it is okay to prioritise your well-being and seek assistance from trained professionals. There is no shame in this. In fact, it is the first brave step to healing. If you require immediate support, please consider reaching out to Lifeline on 13 11 14 or a crisis intervention service in your area. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself as you engage with the content of this podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Talking Free podcast, and today I have a guest with me, Skye Welbourne from the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, and I met Skye through an online community and she reached out to me to be part of the podcast. So welcome, Skye.
Thanks for having me, Trudy. Nice to see you.
No worries. It's so glad. So I'm so happy to finally actually meet you kind of in person, but not.
Face to face on video.
I know, right? So you today are going to talk a little bit about trauma and grief, and that leads into obviously what you do now in your life. But do you want to take us back to where your story begins?
It was in my teen years. So we had a pretty good childhood growing up generally. Some things happened that kind of knocked me a bit when I was 11. But then the majority of the stuff that started to come into our family was when my sister Jay was diagnosed with depression. And so she started having a lot of difficulty with that. She ultimately suicided in 2008 when she was 19, but the 6 years leading up to that, she had severe depression, several suicide attempts. She would always need to go to hospital. She was self-harming, that sort of thing. So obviously for my parents, that was, panic stations, and with 3 other kids at home, I sort of stepped up quite a bit and had to deal with a lot of things that I probably, as being the eldest of the family, probably didn't need to be dealing with, but kind of just had to step in and help out. So I was 3 years older than her. So it was when it all sort of started coming out. She was 13 and I was 16, so kind of towards my late teens, but I was also having issues with my parents over other things, so life at home was pretty chaotic, I suppose, and me rebelling, kind of on that rebellion end of teenagehood, and some other things for me that personally hadn't been dealt with was probably pretty full on for my parents. I don't envy them during that time, I'm sure. But yeah, I also have 2 younger brothers, so that's wild for a family who have never been through anything like that. We never had any experience with people with depression or whatever. Mum and dad just had to ride the wave, I guess, of what was happening.
And I guess even like looking back, you said that was 2008, and in the time of that was the early 2000s when she was obviously dealing with a lot of her issues. Mental health support and awareness wasn't the same as what it was like 20 years ago.
Absolutely not. It was still very hush-hush. Jay didn't really talk to many people about it either, so she would put on a happy face. So she had all her friends and nobody outside the family really expected it. either when she did pass away. So it wasn't a surprise for us. You know, she was going to psychs and she was on medication and, you know, she'd been in and out of hospital and things like that. But to the outside world, she put on the happy face. And so I didn't really feel like I could talk to anyone about it either, because I felt like it was more her thing to share than mine. So we were kind of just dealing with it in the home, all of us kind of muddling our way through that and not really any of us really know what to do about it. But she sort of got to a point where I don't think anything we could have done would have changed her mind. She'd sort of given up on therapy and all that too. A lot of the mental health stuff back then, it was in Newcastle. If anyone's around the Newcastle area, it used to be James Fletcher in town, which was the mental health unit there. And it was not a nice place. And they put her in there for a week once. And I think that solidified in her mind that she was never, her next attempt would be a final one, and she was never going back there, unfortunately, rather than that being her motivation to try to get well. I think it took her in the other direction. A lot of the complaints that she had was around psychologists. She'd go to, just say, a practice where there were a few psychologists, and she'd have her psychologist and she'd start the journey and then they would leave, and then she'd have to start again with someone else, and then they would leave. And I think she just kind of got sick of talking about it. Now there's other therapies now that are much more kind of widely used out there that are a bit more maybe effective, that might have been more effective for her than just talking about it. Like CBT was probably what her main experience of therapy was, and for her that didn't really help, or from her perception that wasn't really helping. So there's only so much you can do to help someone as well. Like by the end of all this, she was 19, driving, you know, had a job and stuff. And so my parents are kind of like, well, what do? We can't tie her down and keep her at home. You know, she has to go out and live a life, and we have to trust that she's okay. And she was still living at home, but, you know, you can't, it's not like having a little kid at home that you can sort of just keep them there and tuck them in and all that. You know, she was out in the world doing her thing, and that would probably have been really hard for them too, to have that kind of being able to let her go and trying to keep her safe at the same time.
Yeah, look, firstly, I just want to say I'm sorry that your family had to go through that, because as we all know, is that a suicide in any form by any person has such a ripple effect to the rest of the family, the rest of their community, the rest of their friends and like network. So the fact that you've been able to go through that and come out on the other side, I first just want to acknowledge that. But just unpacking what you said, like even talking about your sister, in the fact that you said the community and her friends didn't appear to know what was going on. She always put on a brave face, but the family knew. It's such an important thing, I think, for people to become aware of, in the fact that we don't always see the signs and we don't always acknowledge the signs. And this is where often people are looking for that kind of help and don't get it.
Yeah, that's right. Like, you know, if we didn't know she was putting that onto us, we wouldn't have known probably either. But yeah, it was, I know for her closest friends, it was, again, I don't know the conversation she exactly had with them, but I know for them it was a real shock that they had no idea that things were that bad. So yeah, I guess they probably have in the past. I've had some conversations with some of her friends years ago, and, you know, they were like, oh, I wish I'd known, I wish I could have tried to do something. And we were like, we were doing things, and even that kind of gets to the point where if they're an adult, they have to be able to reach back and take that help as well. You can offer and do everything you possibly think you can, but unless they say, yes, I want to take that path and take that help, you're kind of only getting 50% there without them reaching out and taking it. So, and taking the lifeline, I suppose.
Yeah, and just talking into that, I think what comes up for me is that there's often then left with the family and stuff, a lot of guilt around what could they have done more, or the friends, what could they have done more. But like you just pointed out, that you can give everybody all the help in the world and you can show them all the different paths to go down. But unless they take responsibility for their own life and their own actions, then there's not much more you can do. So if I can quickly just speak into that, like, did you have any of that kind of guilt over, or your family have any of that guilt over what you could have done more?
Yes, all in different ways too. So, dad had his own guilt, mum had guilt around different things, and then me, um, as well. Just yeah, like, did I say anything that could have changed things, or all the times we used to fight because like two teenage girls living in the same room. You imagine what that was like. I'd moved out of home by this point when she passed away, but I was like, well, did I contribute to some of her depression? But ultimately, the last conversation I had with her, I call it like a clearing conversation. I didn't know it was goodbye, obviously. But she came to me and she said, "You're the only person who's ever been 100% honest with me." So she knew if I came to you, you would tell me the truth, and that's why she would come to me. So whilst I still had a lot of guilt, that conversation, if I hadn't have had that conversation, I'm not sure where I'd be now. And she did that for me, I think, because she knew she was going. So I'm proud of that, I guess. I thought that everything I did must have contributed, but actually it cut through all the noise because when someone has depression and they're in the home with you and you're just trying to help, I think and not to say this is nothing bad against my parents, but I think they did kind of coddle her a little bit. And so she would use that sometimes to get her own way and things like that, as we do when we're teenagers, like we're trying to one up your sister or whatever. I'm sure I did it to her as well. But she said to me, "Yeah, you're the only person I can come to, and I know 100% you're telling me the truth." So that helped ease things, I suppose. But it didn't help completely. But there's always that what if, what if I hadn't been that way, or what if we hadn't fought so much when we were teenagers, or what if there's so many what ifs, and none of that will change anything.
It's so true though, isn't it? Like, the what if is that big question we can always ask, or why is another one. But I just firstly just want to acknowledge that, like, who you were for your sister and who she saw you as in that moment, and that she gave you that beautiful message, even though you didn't know at the time what that was leading to, but to give you that space to know that you did what you could for her and that you were the best sister you could be in that moment.
Yeah, so I think that I always go back to that conversation. That's the one thing I took from her. And in her note, that's what she wrote about me as well. So it's like, if nothing else, at least I gave her truth and honesty, and she knew that I always had her back. If she came to me and needed anything, I was always there. So even though I wasn't living at home anymore, there could have been 100 other things that could have happened, which may or may not have changed the outcome. But at least, even though I had no idea what I was doing, like I wasn't intentionally trying to just be honest with her. It was just, that's the relationship we had. And so I didn't ever think to not be honest with her, like I just would call it how it was. And sometimes that would go my way and sometimes it wouldn't, as you do when you're siblings and saying what you think about each other.
I totally get it. I'm the oldest of 4 children as well. So believe me, I totally get it.
Yeah, so you just are how you are together. And I didn't really ever change how I was with her, but while I thought that might have been a bad thing, she actually appreciated that. And she did come to me a lot. So even though she didn't always like what she heard, she would still come to me. So I guess in the end, that's all I kind of hold on to that, I suppose.
Yeah, and what a beautiful thing to hold on to. So how did you work through, obviously, that grief and trauma that came after losing your sister?
Well, the first year was pretty much just a blur. I had early days, I had panic attacks, which I'd never in my life experienced before. Like, could not be in the dark. That was mainly the dark. I even had to call my mum I went into a panic attack, and somehow I got a hold of my phone on the bedside table and I called my parents, and my mum had to come down. They were about 45 minutes away, and I could not get to the light switch. I was up against the wall. That was probably the worst of it. That was probably the peak, about 6 weeks in, and was just had to get mum to drive down. And as soon as the light went on, it calmed me down, but I just could not. There was nothing in me that could have got me to that light switch and get up out of bed. It was just unbelievable. And people that live with panic attacks all the time, my heart goes out to them, because that was probably the worst one I had. But it was paralyzing. And so that was really concerning for me. I was like, here I am, I've lost my mind. So a lot of people don't understand that. They just think, oh, I'm just devastated and my heart's broken, but it's so much more than that. It's physical exhaustion, and you can't pull yourself out of bed sometimes, and you just don't know how you could possibly go to work or go back to normal life. And so, yeah, those early weeks, for me, getting back to work after 2 or 3 weeks was probably the best thing for me, just to have some routine, because otherwise I would have just laid in bed probably. All the what ifs coming up, all the just disbelief and shock, even though shocked but not surprised for us, I suppose, because of where we knew she was at, but still just like replaying Dad calling me in my mind, all that stuff was coming up. And so once all that slowly started to ease off, and I used music and running and the gym really helped me work through things. I don't really know exactly what I did apart from those few things. The first year was probably the hardest.
But let's not forget, like, you're a 22, 23-year-old at this point in time, and you're, supposed to be in like normal social terms, like living your best years and, starting to find yourself. And here you are having to deal with not just your own grief, but your family's grief as well. You're not living at home, you're out of home. And, I can imagine, or only begin to imagine, how tumultuous that time must have been for you to even begin to start working through all that.
Being so far past it now, it's hard to like remember being back there, but I don't really know how I got through that. I did have a couple of friends who were coming over and having dinner with me every now and then and stuff, like checking in on me and stuff, which was nice. But yeah, and that's the thing with grief too, is like the whole family is experiencing something slightly different. It's all the same, but it's different. Everyone's having different. Mum and Dad are trying to be there for us, but we're trying to be there for them, and no one really knows where you're going or what you're doing and what to do. And I had some grief counselling early on, which was kind of helpful, but I think I also didn't allow that person or I saw a couple of therapists, but I didn't think it was acceptable to say that I was angry or that I had resentments, or that even some jealousy was coming up around different things just in the grieving process, that you can't talk about that. That's not, like, I don't want anyone to know about that. And so I tucked all that away, and that is what built up on me over 10 years. I used my busy lifestyle as a way to run away from it. So I didn't really deal with it properly. I thought, I've done therapy, I ticked that box, and all I did was just keep myself so busy that when I hit 30, I landed into a chronic stress state, couldn't sleep, heart palpitations, thought I had anxiety, went back to therapy and realised, oh, your lifestyle is just ridiculous. You would never catch me resting. If I was sitting down, I was studying or working. I wasn't ever resting. I was racing triathlons and running and doing Pilates and catching up with friends and doing all these things, and I thought my life was great.
Do you think that was a way of coping, is that you were constantly keeping busy to avoid having to sit in the space and dealing with your emotions?
Yeah, that was exactly what it was. I didn't realise it at the time, and it wasn't till I had my second son, who's born 2 days after Jay's anniversary, her 10-year anniversary it was, And about 3 or 4 months later, I describe it as the lid blowing off. So everything I'd never dealt with in that 10 years, plus some stuff from previous that I hadn't ever thought about, came roaring out of me. And kind of once that happens, you have no choice but to deal with it. And you have to deal with it now. You can't, the lid won't go back on. You can't stuff it back down anymore. So that was the start of the last 5 years, which has been completely different for me. I've been back and done some more therapy and actually said all the things, not just what I thought was acceptable, so that I wouldn't be judged or whatever, and finally worked through all that stuff, which is still there. People think that they've tucked it away and it's gone, but it never goes. It's just building and building over time when you've got more and more things that pile on. So yeah, the last 5 years I feel like I'm a completely different person now. I'm able to cry if I need to. And for me, having kids was a real shift in my grief. A lot of people, I don't think, they just think time is the healer. And to an extent, it does give you some space and processing time and all that sort of thing. And those emotions generally aren't as intense as the early season, but also it's still there. You still have to deal with it. And I think if you don't, then it's only going to come to a point where one day you'll have to, and that might be the most inopportune time, or you never have the time to deal with it. You've just got to deal with it as you go. And yeah, having kids for me it just sort of felt like it sent me back. It changed my grief completely, because I'd sort of been chugging along. She wasn't there for my wedding, and that didn't feel as bad as her not being here for my kids. So I just have this really strong sense of needing to carry her in a way that is, they're going to know her without knowing her, kind of thing. And what they're missing out on, like, she was the most bubbly, happy person on the outside, and I think that was her true personality underneath everything coming out. It wasn't fake, it was her, but she was just battling all that other stuff. And so I try to kind of allow my boys into my grief process a little bit. I don't try to hide it from them. We talk about Auntie J, and she sends them dragonflies, and that's kind of like our little sign of her. And yeah, I just, as my therapist said to me, you've got this backpack of stuff that you've been carrying around, mostly guilt, guilt and things like that. And she said, you need to be able to carry her like as if she's a dragonfly on your shoulder. And so that sort of sent me on the path that I've been on the last few years. And 3 years ago, I decided, I originally wanted to do counselling about 12 years ago, but just never had the courage, never thought I could. And I don't think I was at a place in my own grief journey or whatever where I feel like I could have done this. But I decided, like, I'm in a good place, I'm going to give it a go. And that has given me so much purpose. And it's kind of transforming the pain into something useful, something outside myself that has meaning and helps other people. And I think having something, it doesn't have to be helping other people. It could just be like a hobby or like something in your life that you have where you can put your energy and your creativity and, your sense of self-worth into, that you can build on, that then becomes something that you carry forth and helps you in your grief.
What did you discover about yourself in that process? Like you said, obviously the lid blowing off and the catalyst was having your second son. But what was it inside of that you actually discovered about yourself?
I really feel like the sense of empathy, just, I wouldn't say I was a selfish person before, but I was very kind of unaware of what pain a lot of people were going through. And now I feel like I'm much more open. I'm much more empathetic and feel like I live like in the grey a lot more. I feel like things are as black and white. Some things I feel black and white against, like not hurting children or hurting people or things like that. But there's so much more in the grey area that I feel like I can sit and hold now. And, you can take bits and pieces from here and there, and everyone is unique. I'm so fascinated in hearing other people's stories. Like you, I love reading like books about people or listening to podcasts about people and having conversations with people and just connecting to other people, which I don't think I had before. And it's, even though it's been through pain, it's actually really enriched my life. So that's something that I feel like I'm much more of a deep thinker now and maybe too much sometimes, but just love having like really deep conversations with people. I think that really, just in life in general, not just for work, but I get so much out of that. Like, it's healing for me as well, even if it's just something completely random, something completely different. Like, you've got a very different story to me, but there might be something you would say that I'm like, oh yeah, and I like take that in or like use that, and I feel like I'm just gathering all these bits and pieces and then trying to give that back to others as well.
How do you think it's changed you or made you as a mother?
I don't even know what to say. It's just, I don't think I'd be who I am without all the experiences I've had. Like, I am someone now because I have worked through it all. I can genuinely say that stuff's not holding me back, but it has absolutely shaped me into who I am. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just like a sense of knowing that I feel like I can handle anything. I feel like I can be open with my kids, and if I stuff up, I feel like I'll be able to, which I will at some point, because none of us are perfect, but I feel like I'll be able to take that and repair with them. And I'm just so interested in who they are, and I feel like I'm more kind of, I'm leading them and showing them the way, but also allowing them to be who they are as well. And yeah, I hope if we ever have to deal with anything like mental health issues or whatever, that I'll be able to support them with it. And I hope a lot of the things I like to do now, like I play piano now and I do karate. They're two new things that I've started doing the last 12 months that I find I can just do that and none of my worries are with me. So I love saying to people, like, if you can find something that, yeah, you can channel your energy into that you just love doing, whether it's craft or whether that's, I don't know, exercise or whatever it is, that you can kind of, your worries cannot be there with you, and you can have that other side of life, which is just fun and enjoyment and creativity. That's a really good outlet to have as well.
I think what you've just said is so true, because I think that when you're inside of doing something creative or that you're passionate about, you are so present in the here and now that it literally leaves no room for anything else to be there at the same time. I know I experienced some of that walking the bib track, is that when you're there in the here and now, like nothing else matters. And then you'll go into little stages down the track of feeling differently or whatever, but then you bring yourself back. And I can relate with the exercise or the art therapy or whatever the case may be, that you just get into the zone. And once you're in the zone, nothing else matters but what's happening right here, right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who they go to therapy or they're dealing with like their traumas coming up or like whatever it is, they feel like they just have to stay in that the whole time. But it's still good to have breaks. It's like we don't want to be all ignoring our pain and never looking at it. And we don't want to be all in it as well. We need to be able to float between life and find enjoyment even if we're struggling, and try to have that kind of full spectrum of life to hold us together.
Look, I love what you just said then, because for me, that's really prevalent at the moment, like in my own PTS journey, is that sometimes you do feel guilty for having the good days, because you've been diagnosed with this thing, you're going through this thing, and then when you have the good days and the good moments, you're like, oh, is it okay to actually be doing this and feeling this way? And like you said, life is that roller coaster of emotions. There are going to be the high days, there are going to be the low days. You just have to keep on the roller coaster and know that the next peak and trough is around the corner, instead of staying stuck at the bottom and can't move up, or staying toxically up the top in this positive state of mind that you don't actually deal with all the other shit in the background.
It's good to have everything, like your relationships, your career, your fun and adventure, and then dealing with things as they come up. I think it's better than stuffing it away for a decade or more. Some people never deal with things properly, and then you might get other coping strategies and things that aren't ideal for you that come in. But like I did, the super busy lady. I mean, that wasn't, that was detrimental in one way, but people that reach out for drugs and alcohol or like other substances or things, or pushing people away, like there's so many things that we do to try and avoid what we need to deal with sometimes.
Yeah. And inside of that, going back to like becoming a counsellor and obviously then helping others through their grief and relationship issues, problems, whatever, like tell us more about that.
When I first come up with the idea first popped into my mind, I was actually a bus driver, which is a random career path that I took in my early 20s. I did that for a couple of years, but I remember I was working on a Sunday and I was driving along in Newcastle up one of the beaches, Nobby's Beach, if anyone knows that area, and looking out over the water as I'm driving. It was a beautiful day, and it just popped into my head that I was like, I wonder if I could be a counsellor. And it's random, like I'd never ever thought of it in my life. This was probably 2 years after Jay had passed away. And our family were in that real state of, like we were involved with Lifeline, and Mum ran a support group for a little while, and we were kind of just out there. Mum and Dad did some news stories in the local paper, and just you're in that. A lot of people do it. They start to share more about the things that have impacted them, whether that's a cancer journey or suicide or whatever, and the family starts to want to give back to the community and stuff. So we're kind of in that phase, and I stuffed it away it was about 12 years, but it just kept popping up every now and then. And I had been to therapy, and I felt like I was getting to a good place, and I just thought, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So I was a stay-at-home mum at the time, and thankfully I had my mum to help me watch the kids when I was studying, and got my course done, and then just started up my business, and off I went. I was just open to whatever happened. But yeah, relationship counselling for couples and individuals seems to be my thing, and I do grief counselling as well. And the grief counselling, most people, I mentioned about my sister on my website, and most people choose me because of that if they're coming for grief work. It's awful that we have to go through grief, but I also see the beautiful side of it now, which can be very hard for people in the early days. And if I'd have heard that myself, I'd have been like, you're ridiculous, go away. So I get that, but kind of once you come full circle, I can see all the blessings that I've had from my grief as well, which is just being able to feel more deeply and have beautiful conversations with people and feel more connected, and it drives me now rather than holding me back. So grief works really sort of touches my heart a little bit, even though it's always horrible and sad situations what's bringing people in. It's also very beautiful and very raw, and the connections and the things that people say is just, it's like tapping right into the core of who you are when you're grieving. Like there's just so many layers to it. There's so much depth to it that you probably don't even understand yourself at first. And I think it's given me more depth as a person in general. And I feel like that helps me be able to relate to people as well, because I don't know if people think that counsellors and therapists or psychologists or whatever have no problems, or there sort of seems to be some people out there that think we're perfect and we don't have any problems, and we know all the things, and so we do everything perfectly all the time, but we're all just the same as everybody else. We've got relationship issues, we have grief, we have trauma, we have, we're all humans as well. Sometimes don't do the right thing or do the things we know are good for us too. So yeah, I just try to bring myself into the sessions with people and just be who I am, and hopefully relate to them a little bit and help them feel like they can open up.
What do you think are some key lessons, either from your own journey or from working with other people dealing with grief and trauma, that you could offer to the listeners, or that you see as a pattern?
A lot of people discount the struggle. Like they want the ride to be smooth, and they don't want to deal, and I did this too, like you don't want to deal with maybe the quote unquote bad or uncomfortable things, but sometimes that's where most of the lessons are, and the growth that you get is from looking at that, well, I call it like the shadow side of things, or looking in the dark closet over there of all the stuff you've stuffed down. I feel like a lot of people get their breakthroughs by kind of looking there and dealing with that. So that's one thing. What else? What else do? Yeah, I just, especially with grief stuff, I think a lot of people, they just find more of who they are deep within them. You don't really pay attention to on the day to day. But again, that's if you allow yourself to go there and to feel it. People value their connections with others a lot more. I think sometimes the hard things that we go through, whilst they are awful and you wouldn't wish them on other people either. Yeah, I don't even know how to describe it really.
No, I can relate to that in the sense of, I think in the world we live in at the moment with social media, where you see people on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever it may be, and you only see one facet of their life. But then you also think that you are connected to them because you are seeing them on a, daily, weekly basis or whatever. But so few people these days actually reach out and pick up the phone and have a genuine conversation, or arrange to catch up with a coffee or a drink with somebody to have a genuine conversation. And we think we are connecting with everybody when in fact we are becoming more and more disconnected. And until I think something like that as a tragedy, even though it's so hard in that moment to deal with that tragedy, it does make people rethink about how they connect. We're all human beings. We all have these feelings and emotions. We all have these same issues. As I say at the beginning of the podcast, I may not be walking in your shoes, but I am walking along this same life path. And, it's when we reach out and have these connections that, that real part of being a human being actually occurs. And I think we've forgotten how to do that in this modern world of social media.
Yeah, I think so too. Having conversations with people like that aren't just surface level. how's the weather? Or, like being able to go that deeper place is really nice. And it would be really lovely if everybody had at least one, hopefully a couple more people in their life without having to go to therapy, that they could get those experiences outside of therapy as well. Obviously we have those types of conversations in therapy, but I would really love it if everybody could have someone, 2 or 3 people in their life. A lot of people find through their grief too that the people they thought would be there aren't in the capacity that they thought they would, and then random strangers might be the ones who step in and they become your new people or whatever. So yeah, it sort of crumbles everything down, and then you reassess, and then you rebuild, and hopefully rebuild around the pain something that's still a beautiful life. And when you were talking about guilt before of not being, like having a good day, I was like that too. There's points where you're like, oh, have I thought about her enough today, or have I been sad today and I should be sad? And it's just ebbs and flows, and just got to roll with it, really, don't you know?
Yeah, I think that's what people don't realize, is that these things happen to us, like grief, trauma, events, like dealing with complex PTS, where it's multiple triggers that affect you, which is in my case. But people think that, it's supposed to be a certain way. I think if you're not in it or haven't experienced it, you expect it to be a certain way. And I think people forget that in most cases, we've all lost somebody close to us, whether that's a parent, whether that's a child, whether it's a loved one from extended family, whether it's a good friend. We've all been there, done that, but the whole experience of that grief and trauma is individual for each person. Like there is no one size fits all, or everybody experiences it in the same way. And if people can just kind of sit back and reflect on their own experience, and as you said, have empathy for how other people are dealing, and help to raise them up and get them out of those funks or downward spirals, or just be a clearing for. I don't like to use the word hold space. I think that's become such a convoluted kind of way of dealing with things. But I think being a clearing for is just, there is space, there is an area to just be. And I think we forget, we're so much in the doing that we forget to just be.
Yeah, That's true. Yeah, we're just like, I've got to do this thing, and I'm so busy, and I've got all this stuff to do, and the stuff will always be there. And I think it really helps you reassess what is important as well. You know, what was important to me before I lost my sister, like that just flipped on its head immediately. All the relationships I had, I started questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. And yeah, I find a lot of my clients do that too. It's just they're like wrestling with everything. You know, this is how I thought it was meant to be, and now that's not that anymore. It's something completely different. I don't know what that is yet. And so they're trying to wrestle with all the feelings and all the thoughts that they're having, and you're just sort of like trying to untangle this mess that this is meant to be this neat thing over here, and now it's this tangled ball of mess, and I don't know what to do with myself. So being able to work through it is important. I always say to people, we go where the grief takes us when they come in. You know, if you're angry today, then we'll work with that. There's no should, there's no right way. There's, like you said, everyone's different. So there's no rule book to follow. What works for one person doesn't work for another. You know, like I've done types of therapy that other people have done, and they're like, oh, no, that didn't work for me. And then there'll be other things that work for them that didn't work for me. So you've just got to find your way and be gentle with yourself as well. I think we're quite harsh on ourselves of we have to be through this in a certain time, or, like it's coming up to my sister's 16-year anniversary this year. And there's all new things that are coming up for me. Like her voice is completely gone now. Like I can't remember it. I don't, unless there's no really, she passed away when it was mainly just photos. We didn't really have a lot of video of her, and if someone passed away now, we've got the smartphones and you've probably got more video recordings or bits and pieces. Like I can't remember her voice anymore. That used to be something that terrified me. What if I forget? And some of the memories have faded quite a bit. And so, there's always something that you're dealing with. And now we're coming up to the point where once it's 20 years, this is starting to enter my mind now. When it's 20 years, she'll be gone longer than she was here. And, she's missed out on, like 20 years sounds like that couldn't even be possible. So, yeah, you're always wrestling with something. There'll always be something there that you'll need to work on at some point.
And I like what you said about being gentle with yourself, because I think for all of us, myself included, you don't have enough self-compassion. You don't allow yourself to just, even just patting yourself on the back because you got through something, or that you overcome a sad moment or an angry moment, or whatever the case may be. You're allowed to feel all of it, and you're allowed to be in all of it. It's how you respond moving forward out of that. And people just, forget to have that self-compassion to go, it's okay to be all of these things and deal with whatever comes up on whatever day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we definitely don't have enough self-compassion, that's for sure. We're always berating ourselves or saying, oh, we should be doing this, or we should be doing something else, or, I think we hold ourselves to sometimes a higher standard than we hold other people to. Like if you were my friend and you came over and you were upset, I'd be like, I'd be there for you, but it's like you're not there for yourself. You're just berating yourself for feeling sad today, or for not having a good day, or for being tired. You should have gone to bed earlier, or, we're always just berating ourselves rather than talking to ourselves like, yeah, you would if a good friend came over, or a family member, or your partner even, where you've got more compassion for other people. So that's a good point too, yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I apologise if it kind of evokes some emotions, but I just want to ask you, like 16 years on, if you could tell your sister one thing now, back then, what would it be?
You're stronger than you believe you are. So I think if she'd have felt that, she would have maybe been able to find something to hold on to bring her out. You've got some nephews coming, you don't want to miss out on them. If like the ghost of future me went back.
I'm sure she's looking down on them now, and as you said, they're little dragonflies that are buzzing around them, that she's there watching over them, and that you're keeping her memory alive.
Yeah, my parents, they were the first to kind of have the dragonfly stuff happening. Just, they would always turn up in random places that you wouldn't expect them to be. I never saw one or felt like an experience like that where I felt like it could have been, like people have their signs or whatever. And it wasn't till I was pregnant with Ollie, so that my second son. I was laying on the lounge, very unwell, thought he must have been a girl because I was so unwell, with my little toddler running around. And I just rolled over on my back and I looked up and there was a dragonfly in my house. And I hadn't been outside that day. So I was like, a real one. I was like, how did that get there? And then it just disappeared and I never found it. So that was kind of like, I didn't think anything of it really. And then the day that we were going to the hospital, because I had a Caesar with him, we were packing the car. There was one flying back and forth at the door of the car, and then there was one at the hospital door. And I was like, oh. And then I started seeing them after that. So always like, I don't really have necessarily any super strong beliefs in any direction really, but I like to hold on to that kind of thing because that kind of thing feels nice, whether there is or isn't, it is her or not, it feels nice. So that's kind of my dragonfly story.
And look, like you just said, it's not a matter of belief or how into certain things you are. It's a personal reflection that if you find something that reminds you of a loved one that's departed, that you can somehow hold on to their memory in a day-to-day basis, and that's the sign you need from the universe that they're with you, that they're there, that they're supporting you, that they're enjoying life with you, even beyond the current realm that we're living in. I think it's important to take what works for you and makes your life have purpose and meaning, regardless of what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, yeah. And like my business name is a nod to her as well. So it just popped in my head. Again, it's one of those things that it just randomly popped into my head and nothing else felt right. And I looked up because obviously Jay is her name, but her name has an E on the end, but I thought that would be way too convoluted for people searching up. But the blue jay bird symbolizes certain things as well, like connection and fearlessness and like all the things that I kind of would love for my clients to get out of the work that they do with me. So kind of all ties in.
And that's so beautiful, like that it actually does marry in with your line of work and is a nod to your sister. And just on that, I will include in the show notes links to your business, which is Blue Jay Counselling. And do you do work remote via Zoom as well, or is it all face-to-face?
Yeah, I do online as well. Some people prefer that, or it opens up our possibilities of who we can see when we are willing to work online with therapists or with clients. So yeah, I've had a few people that aren't in my area, but good to have.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that it opens up an opportunity for any of our listeners that if they want to reach out or, refer to somebody else like your services, that if they relate to you, that if they want any counselling services, that you're there. So I will definitely link those details in the show notes. I just want to say thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share your and your sister's story with us today.
Thanks for having me. I share about her quite a bit because she's kind of my why, I suppose. So yeah, hopefully there's something that I said that can help someone else and they can take that into their own life if they're struggling at the moment, because I guess that's why I do share it.
No problems at all. And I'd just like to finish off by asking, what are you grateful for today?
Oh, my kids, they're just so happy today. They're getting along. I wanted to work on myself. Like, they gave me the extra push. So, I'm just amazed by them. We get frustrated as well at times, but it all overrides the frustration times. And my husband, because when I fell apart 5 years ago and felt like I couldn't hold it together, I will just quickly add this in. The way he treated me during that, when I pretty much cried for a whole year, and he was like, whoa, what's going on? Was just all the therapy I did wouldn't have had as great of effect if he hadn't been who he was and how he supported me. So little shout out to Grant. So grateful for him too.
Thank you for tuning in to the Talking Free podcast today. If you have an idea for a future episode or a story you'd like to share, then please message me, as I am always up for real, raw and authentic conversations. If you love what you are hearing, then please be sure to subscribe to hear all the latest episodes and spread the word to your family, friends and colleagues so they too can listen in. If you are sharing on social media, then please be sure to tag me at _Trudy_Marie_ so I can personally acknowledge you. I am always open to comment about how these episodes have resonated with you. It would also mean the world to me if you were to leave a 5-star review to ensure the Talking Free podcast is heard by more listeners around the world. And remember, lead with love as you live this one wild and precious life.